Wabarakatuh. Hello and welcome back to Online Summer School 2021 on Comparative Regionalism in a Changing World Order, hosted by Postgraduate School of Universitas Airlangga here in Indonesia, in collaboration with United Nations University Institute on Comparative Regional Integration Studies in Belgium, and of course, Higher School of Economics of M. Narikbayev Kazgu University in Kazakhstan. Good morning, participants. Good afternoon, or maybe evening, wherever you may be. I hope that we're all still well and healthy and, of course, safe. I'm Arya from Universitas Airlangga, and it is an honor for me to be here again as the host for the last day of this summer school. Of course, while it is the last day, it's still going to be very, very fascinating and an exciting day because today we are going to have presentations from each groups. And this is a perfect opportunity to interact directly with one another, ask questions, exchange thoughts, and maybe have constructive debates, not only between participants, but also all of us here today, including the conveners. Now, before diving into the presentation, I will be reading some general rules that the participants will have to adhere to. First, each group will have up to 30 minutes for their presentations. Each group will also have a 15 minutes Q&A session. So in total, 30 plus 15 minutes. After that, after the presentation has been finished, I will be facilitating the Q&A session. And each group can only take 3 questions due to the time limit. And I will be keeping track of the time and will be reminding one person in each group if they have 15 minutes left for their presentation segment and once they have reached the end. And then we will proceed with the Q&A session. I have also received a report that group 3 requested so that they can go first today. So without further ado, I welcome group 3 to deliver their presentation. The floor is yours, group 3.
All right, I hope you see the slide. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, yes.
All right, thank you. So I'm so delighted to be here to present you the topic of distinctive dimensions of ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. I'll be succinct and straightforward as the time is limited. So, well, when we talk about the regional integrations or corporations, we tend to see the EU, the African Union, the Mercosur in Latin America, and a number of regional integrations around the world, as well as ASEAN. But what do we see this in our reality? Well, a lot of people think that the regional integration of corporations do not concern us as an individual. So the prime question is that, how does the regional integration and cooperation concern us? So I give you a prime example. There is a guy traveling from Barcelona to New York. He bought a ticket for 350 euros, and the flight was delayed for 4 hours. And then he took a flight from London to Paris. And it was 1 day delay, basically canceled. What rights does he have? Well, under the EU law, he gets the compensation up to 600 euros. That means he didn't pay for the flight. And then for the canceled flight, he gets the right to accommodation, the right to phone calls, and the food and drink. And all of these are free of charge, thanks to the EU Flight Compensation Regulation 2004. And you don't have to be an EU citizen to get protected under this regulation, as any national flying from the EU or to the EU can be protected under this regulation. And this is to show you that in reality, the role or the operation of international, regional integration and cooperation is closer to our daily life than we thought. Apart from that, we have the freedom of movement of persons. In the EU, you can move freely and take your own family to work in other member states of the EU. In ASEAN, we're trying to establish that as well. We call it the free flow of skilled laborers. In the Mercosur, they kind of have the same kind of, the initiative to have the movement of person as well. And apart from those movement of persons, we have the movement of goods and services. That means, in a sense, we have more choices in our products and services. So this is to show you that the role of the cooperation and integration is closer to our daily life than we thought. Well, these are the figures that you can all see on internet simply, but this is to point out that comparing to the EU, the ASEAN has more diversities in terms of the languages. We have more than 700 spoken local languages. We have more religions and beliefs in the ASEAN, in which really contrary to the EU dominant Christianity. So what's the reason of existence, the raison d'être of the regional integration and cooperation? Is it for security, for prosperity, or for any other reason? You find out. So the history of ASEAN has a really long history. We have pre-organization called ASA and called Malfilindo, and it becomes ASEAN in 2007 under the Charter of ASEAN, or we call ASEAN Charter. And the objectives of the ASEAN we see later on. But the institutional structure of ASEAN, we have the ASEAN Summit, which is the great decision maker of ASEAN. Everything has to come to ASEAN Summit when it's not dealt with other matters. And we have ASEAN Coordinating Council, we have ASEAN Secretariat in Jakarta, and ASEAN also interacts with other states, for example, Turkey, any other sovereign state, as well as the international organization, for example, the UN, the WTO, and the EU, and also with the non-governmental organizations. Well, these are the objectives of the ASEAN. We have 3 pillars. It sounds like the structure of the European Union, but it's not the same thing. It's like potato, potato, tomato, tomato. It's just like you have 2 twin daughters, but they're not dressing the same way. So we have political security community, we have economic community, and we have social and cultural community. So the outline of this presentation, I talked about the legal aspect of the ASEAN, and the second speaker will be responsible for the security complexity in ASEAN. And the third topic, and the fourth, will deal with the external relation of ASEAN. And the last one will end up with the economic and environmental trends of ASEAN. Right, the legal aspect of ASEAN. Well, there is a legal maxim saying that ubi societas ibi jus. Where there is a society, there is law. So you have your own law in your own country, you have law in Somalia, you have law in Vietnam, and also in ASEAN as a community, as a society, we have our own system as well, but it's probably different from the EU system. So where's the ASEAN in the legal arena? Here we're not talking about domestic law or the national law of a single country. ASEAN is not under the law of any country, but it's governed by the international law system. In the domestic law, you have legislature, executive branch, and judicature, which enacts law, enforce law, interpret and apply laws. But in the international legal system, on the contrary, we don't have this kind of structure. Everything has to be consented because every single state is sovereign. They are equal in their legal status. So who are the actors under the international regime? So we have sovereign states like Vietnam, like Germany, like Canada. And we also have international organizations like the EU, like the WTO, like ASEAN, like African Union, and et cetera, et cetera. And we have any other actors in this regime. So the fundamental legal features of ASEAN, and I compare this with the EU. I'm not trying to be Eurocentric here, but it's just to make a comparison. So before you become an international organization, you need to have a document which establishes the status of that organization. And in this case, it's called ASEAN Charter 2007. And it governs all the relation between ASEAN itself and member state and external relations. And on the other hand, in the EU system, you have EU founding treaties. Second, ASEAN is called an international organization. It's under the international law regime. But on the other hand, if you look at the EU, we call it supranational organization. And why is that? Because the super organization has more power, over the member states. Both has a legal personality as a person under the international law. But in the EU system, we have the separate legal order. That means they have the EU law, which is above the domestic law of the member state in the hierarchical order. Any domestic law cannot violate the EU system. Secondly, the EU law to a certain extent can become automatically the domestic law of its member state, in which this system doesn't take place in the ASEAN system. And thirdly, the individual of the EU citizen can invoke the provisions of the EU law to protect their rights under the jurisdiction of their nations. For example, under the French courts, if they are French national. Well, in terms of decision-making, ASEAN has a very particular way of dealing with problems. We call it ASEAN way, which is to consult and to have a consensus. And this is the concept deriving from the concept of dealing with issues from Indonesian concept of dealing with problem. And it's quite making some sort of difficulty to a certain extent to make a decision to have a consensus. But on the other hand, on the EU system, we have multiple ways of voting, of making decisions, and the majority vote is one of the effective means to reach decisions. And lastly, in the EU system, we have the organ called the Court of Justice of the European Union, or the CJEU, which is really effective. But in ASEAN, we have a particular way of dealing with issues. And the final result of dealing with the dispute is going to be the ASEAN Summit as usual. But this method has never been utilized in ASEAN system. So I pass on to the next speaker, Mr. Joshua, for the security complexity in ASEAN. Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian. Okay, thank you. So, the provisional definition of security architecture today will be an overarching, coherent, and comprehensive security structure for a geographically defined area, which facilitates the resolution of that region's policy concerns and achieves its security objectives. ASEAN, or the Southeast Asian nations in general, usually focus on more non-traditional threats, quote, such as infectious disease, terrorism, transnational crime, and disaster relief or mitigation, which is, quote, crucial to nurturing trust and promoting community building in East Asia. I would like to try to connect this to the nuclear weapon-free zone and Southeast Asian architecture, if possible. Essentially, my idea is that the establishment of this nuclear weapon-free zone in the 1995 Bangkok Treaty is within the normal idea of the security complexes of Southeast Asia, especially within the provisional definition of security architecture presented earlier. Next. So, quote, the 1995 Bangkok Treaty conveyed a shared understanding among all 10 ASEAN members on several viewpoints of regional solidarity and the relevance of NAM, or the non-aligned movement. First, they were convinced that establishing a Southeast Asian nuclear weapon-free zone was an essential component of the ZOPFAN, which would contribute to 1, strengthening the security of states in the zone, and 2, enhancing international peace and security as a whole. Each ASEAN member accepted a set of responsibilities concerning no production, testing, use, or disposal of nuclear weapons, although the right to use nuclear energy for peaceful purposes related to economic development and social progress was asserted. These points were entirely consistent with the commitments called for at the 11th Non-Aligned Movement Summit. I would say these are related to the ideas of the Southeast Asian security architecture, because simply if they don't have nuclear weapons, they can focus on these more non-traditional forms of security management. They can invest more funds into, say, anti-terrorism operations, or ensuring that migrations happen in a safe and legal way, or that there is a more robust anti-epidemic measure that is common among ASEAN or other regional associations. Simply put, more money for other purposes. And next.
So hello everybody, it's now me Umair from Pakistan, and I would like to discuss about China's role towards ASEAN and vice versa. So next slide, please. So first of all, I want to highlight the history of the background of the China's role in ASEAN and how it has attracted the global power as well. So first of all, it was Islamic radicalism in the early 21st century when US came with an idea that under the flag of war on terror, it came that US has all the rights to defend its people and its territory against Islamic terrorism or Islamic radicalism. So that was the starting point of US towards ASEAN. But in the background, in the
Okay. My name is Lawal Ezekiel Adegun from Nigeria. Next slide, please. Thank you. Briefly, I will be speaking on the role of China in African Union. The Afro-Chinese relations, it simply refers to the historical, political, economic, military, social, and cultural connection between the mainland China and the African continent. The trade between China and Africa increased by 700% in the last 2 decades. And currently, China is the largest trade partner in the African continent. The rule of engagement of China in Africa is very similar to what we have in Central Asian countries, that of CA5+1 framework. In African continent, Africa has a centralized regional body called African Union. Under the African Union, we have other sub-regional authorities like ECOWAS, SADC, EAC, COMESA, ECAS, and the rest. Next slide, please. At the African Union, at the level of African Union, we have 55 members of state, and the framework is AU 55+1. At the ECOWAS, which is Economic Community of West African States, there are 15 members of state. The framework is West African State 15+1. At the SADC level, which is Southern African Development Community, with 16 members of state, we have Southern African 16+1. We have EAC, which is Eastern African Community, with six members, and we have Eastern African 6+1. We have COMESA, Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, with 19 states. and the framework is Eastern and Southern Africa 19+1. We also have ECAS, Economic Community of Central African States, with 11 members of state, and the framework is Central African State 11+1. Next slide, please. Okay, and so you can go to the next slide also. Next slide. Next. Okay. What are the area of collaboration? We have trade and investment, infrastructures, security, and a lot more. It was Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, the former president of Tanzania, who said a house should not be built so close to another that a chicken from one can lay an egg in the neighbor's yard, not so far away that a child cannot shout to the yard of his neighbor. Based on this philosophy, I agree that regionalism is good, but it has to be mutual and be balanced. Thank you. Next.
Thank you. Central Asia and Association of Southeast Asian Nations. Next, please. Can Central Asia be integrated? Can Central Asia be integrated like ASEAN? Although the Shanghai Cooperation Organization offers a flexible model based on the principles of non-interference, diversity, and mutual respect, this project depends heavily on China. Central Asian regimes are at various stages of authoritarianism and transition to a market economy. So a larger organization making decisions that the states oppose would be a significant threat to the organization's internal stability. The ASEAN-style organization could allow nations to develop their own internal trade connections and support each other's development, while providing a more unified policy to negotiate with major powers more effectively. Gradually present a cohesive foreign policy toward the outside world in ways that reassure major powers. A more integrated Central Asia could take better opportunities to grow partnerships with China while addressing their concerns of losing sovereignty. Prevent nations from feeling that they need to balance the influences of Russia and China. Enable the region to shift from battleground for influence into a more unified, stable region. A more integrated and unified Central Asia could act as a catalyst for Afghanistan's peace process and economic development. A Central Asian organization with a coordinated policy on foreign relations would make China's Belt and Road Initiative plans much easier, allowing for a more comprehensive policy rather than negotiating different, disjointed agreements with each nation. Next, please. Kazakhstan-ASEAN relations, prospects for greater engagement, obstacles. Kazakhstan has long recognized ASEAN's importance and has tried to step up its engagement with ASEAN and participate in ASEAN-led mechanisms. However, due to a moratorium placed on new memberships in the ASEAN Regional Forum, as well as on applications for new ASEAN dialogue partners, Kazakhstan has not yet been successful in formally participating in ASEAN mechanisms. Nonetheless, since January 2014, Kazakhstan has appointed its ambassador to Indonesia as its first ambassador to ASEAN. Kazakhstan and ASEAN so far is the vast geographical distance and relatively weak transport and logistical links between Kazakhstan and the ASEAN countries. New opportunities for greater Kazakhstan ASEAN engagement. First, Kazakhstan is the largest country in Central Asia, and its central location it plays a key role in China's Belt and Road Initiative and has therefore attracted greater interest from ASEAN countries. For example, in March 2019, Vietnam started to use the train road through China and Kazakhstan to transport its goods. And second, the fact that Kazakhstan has the most developed economy and infrastructure in Central Asia. Thank you.
Good morning, this is Kazi. I worked on economic and environmental affairs as a researcher.
Are you back? Right. So in the meantime, I think Omaya can go on the 2 minutes extra time.
Sure, thanks.
Next, please.
Which one is your slide? This one?
No, the previous one.
Previous
Just
one. All right, go ahead.
the previous one. Thanks so much. So I was explaining that how ASEAN has got attracted towards the global power and China and the US. So as always, US has made an excuse of Islamic radicalism or terrorism in the ASEAN, and they got into ASEAN, as it happened everywhere. We have the example of Iraq and Afghanistan. I don't want to get into the details. So just wanted to mention some of the extremist groups in ASEAN. The one was from Indonesia, Jama Ashraf Dola, JAD. And then there was this separatist movement in Aichi as well since 2010, still going on. And then there was this terrorist attack in Philippines in 2016. And the extremists claimed that they were from IS and IS. So the security issue has been created in the ASEAN as well, like Asia. So they got back into this. They created this circle of terrorism and Islamic radicalism. But the literature says that, in the retrospect of the literature, I have noticed that a lot of scholars have written that it was China and its impact on the ASEAN and growing ties with the ASEAN countries that the US got into the ASEAN circle. So since 2010, this shift has been seen between China and ASEAN countries. So the background is that in 1970s and 1980s, the policies of Deng Xiaoping was toward friendly relations with the ASEAN countries. And it got practicalized in 1997. And then in 2001, when the China became the member of ASEAN. And similarly, it became the ASEAN has been viewed by China as an expanding political and security linkage, because as we know that they have this South Asian Sea, and the China has to ensure that its territorial integrity has not been compromised by the ASEAN countries. So there is a paradoxical situation between China and ASEAN countries. On the one hand, China wants to secure its markets in ASEAN, but on the other hand, China also do not want to compromise its territorial integrity in South China Sea. So coming towards the future prospects of China and its relation with the ASEAN. So if the relations are mismanaged, everyone will suffer, because like I mentioned that after 2010, when they signed a free trade agreement, China became the largest partner import-export partner of ASEAN countries. So ASEAN countries will definitely not want to deteriorate their relation with the China. As most recently in Malaysia, China is investing around $70 billion of different projects, but the Malaysian government has resisted, and they have closed some of their projects. So it's not sure the China relations with the ASEAN, because they have resistance over there. Similarly, they are facing resistance with with the Philippines as well. Last year, Philippines won the case in ICJ against China over territorial integrity in South China Sea. But there is this professor from Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. He mentioned that China has to focus on the Asia, because that's where China can make sure that China is a global power. Once it makes sure that China is a regional power. And the current president of China, Xi Jinping, also reiterated that he called for building strong relation with the ASEAN countries by highlighting the common and shared interest with the ASEAN countries, like the China is similarly doing with the South Asian countries, especially with the Pakistan. So the policy of Xi Jinping, the president of China, is that to highlight the common interest with the other countries and to strengthen their ties with those countries, like in South China with Pakistan and Bangladesh, and similarly with the ASEAN countries. Thanks. So I would like to request Kazi Musa to.
Yes, may I go now? Yes, like yes, economic trends of ASEAN. Like as we know, economic issues are one of the prime focusing issue of ASEAN, and where the effective cooperation is the number one principle that ASEAN has been following. And one of the three pillars of ASEAN is ASEAN Economic Community that formed in 2015, and it defines the footprint of ASEAN economic trends. However, in 2014, ASEAN was collectively the third largest economy in Asia and the seventh largest in the world. Next. Here we can see the blueprint of 2008 to 15 of ASEAN. It shows there are some trade agreements they focused on to increase the mutual economic trade, like single market and production-based, free flow of goods, elimination of tariffs, elimination of non-tariff barriers, custom integration, removes substantially all restriction on trades. Next. And this is the recent economic footprint of ASEAN. It shows some characteristics that has been passed in 2015, and target is 2025, is highly integrated and cohesive economy, competitive, innovative, dynamic ASEAN, enhanced connectivity and sectoral cooperation, resilient, inclusive, people-oriented, and people-centered ASEAN, and global ASEAN. Next. Here we can see two graphs. Like one graph shows like last 5 years GDP growth of ASEAN. It shows like from 2014 to 2017, the economic growth was increasing within very good extent, but from 18 to 19, growth decreased because of a huge trade, huge debt in private and public sectors in ASEAN countries, as well as the negative impact of trade war between US and China. And the second graph shows the economy, the whole economy of ASEAN countries, individually by countries. Like here it shows Indonesia is the most biggest economy in ASEAN, and Brunei, Laos, Cambodia are the a small contributor. Next. Here we are. I'm going to talk about environmental issues. like some challenges that has been facing by ASEAN are like decline in soil fertility, coastal mangrove and coral reef ecosystem endangered, extreme climate change, decline in fish stocks. So to focus on those challenging issues, ASEAN also takes some steps like soft institutionalization, preference of non-binding agreements, reliance on national institutions. The next, okay, next, go next. Yes, like here the ASEAN's some initiatives, like it has working with very closely with international actors like IMO and IPIEC to solve the to solve the environmental issues, and it also upholding its ASEAN socio-cultural community to make awareness and to support the environmental factors, and ASEAN also following some agreements on transboundary haze issues. Like haze is the one of the prime problem in ASEAN areas because of wildfire and sometimes man-made fires in the jungle. So that has been also a matter of awareness and strong laws. So ASEAN also working on these issues. So if I conclude all these, I have to say that ASEAN is one of the good example to the world as a regional integrations organization, and it has with diversified cultural and economic structure that has been a good example for other areas like Africa and Central Asia. They can follow this, and I have to say that ASEAN is one of the peaceful area without nuclear weapon in any country. So I have to say that ASEAN is doing from all these aspects is really appreciative. So thank you very much.
Well, I have to apologize for the inconvenience caused, and thanks for the extra time given to the gentleman who faced a technical problem. And well, thank you once again for all the audience for your attention. And thanks to Ariel who made this wonderful slide. I pass the floor to Mr. Moderator. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think I'll take it from here to manage the Q&A. Before starting this, I just want to spend literally a couple of seconds by saying that this was an amazing presentation, very comprehensive, very well delivered, despite the difficulties and technical problems experienced. You didn't lose your pattern of presentation. You stuck to your original plan. And I appreciated very much the group work. This is an impressive, you can see here on the slide, is an impressive amount of people, and to coordinate this requires very, very refined abilities. So well done and thumbs up to you all. I'm also happy to see that many of the topics covered in the summer school were included and very much elaborated on. So this I think was a plus of your presentation as well. I now open the floor for up to 3 questions. So I'm afraid we don't have enough time to ask for more. Given that you are sharing the slides, let me open the participants tab. So we can keep the slides on, but if I have the list here, I can see who raises their hands. So the floor is open for any questions or comments, and I will go for maximum 3, as said. So anyone who would like to come forward? I don't see any for the moment. So let me ask you a question. And the question is not addressed to any one of you specifically. Please do feel free to answer this question on the basis of who wants to engage with it. On the basis of everything you have covered and on the basis of everything you have told us and you have researched, which theory do you think best explains ASEAN's position in world politics. Are we observing a realist behavior here? Do you think that liberal principles are sustaining ASEAN's engagement with the world? Or do you see more role for ideas, norms, and values having importance here? Or maybe a fourth theoretical strand? What are your impressions about this? I can see Joshua would like to answer this.
I would probably see it as a mix of constructivism and probably neorealism, because while they do agree on some matters, they're usually non-binding, because unless they're more militarily powerful, usually a realist thinking goes that treaties will eventually be broken. But if anyone else has any other perspectives.
Thank you, Joshua. I think Omair would like to jump in.
Yes, Professor. Actually, this constructivist perspective is very well works in South Asia, from where I belong. But secondly, when it comes to ASEAN, I see everybody will target the realism, that everybody goes for their own interest. Every state has their own interest, whether it's Vietnam, Philippines, or China. But personally, I think rational choice theory also works really well here, because as I mentioned during my slides, that China don't want to cut its ties, absolutely not, with the ASEAN countries, because it's the largest import and export partner of ASEAN countries. But similarly, China wants to make sure that China doesn't compromise its territorial integrity in South China Sea, because China is looking that the countries like Quad is working, is not very well, but since a couple of years, like 2-3 years back, Quad is working very well in ASEAN. It doesn't have regular annual sessions like ASEAN and China, but Quad is there as a threat for China.
Excellent. That was a very comprehensive overview, Omar. Thank you so much. I think that if there are no other questions or comments from the audience, I believe we can have a round of virtual applauses, at least for the first presenters for today, actually. And I believe we can proceed now. So I have on my list group 2 to go next. So please contradict me if I'm wrong, or otherwise we can proceed with group 2 whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Group 2 is ready.
We can see the slides and hear you. So thank you.
Yeah. So our first speaker is unfortunately absent, but she has recorded her presentation. So I'll play for her.
If you put it on the presentation mode, it will work, I think.
Yeah, I think it's audible. Is it audible?
I think you might have to share your audio when you go into the screen sharing settings. You might have to share your audio for us to hear it.
Hello?
We can hear you, Anish, but we cannot hear Teresa's video. So I believe, as was suggested, you may want, let me see. You may have to share your video with your audio once you share your screen.
We could also share the presentation with the moderator, and if they can instead of us show it, then maybe because they already have the audio input, that might be useful for us.
Yeah. Yes. I'll.
Okay. So I've tried to request control.
Yeah,
so
please.
The request is mine.
Yeah. Done.
So let me see if I can find a way. I'm afraid I don't see this. Okay, let's see if this works.
Yeah, it works.
I like how after 15 months of living on Zoom, we still have a lot to learn, right? You know what we can do, Anish?
Yeah, yes, sir.
If you continue with the presentation, yeah, because we cannot hear this. So if you continue with the presentation and meanwhile, one of you manages to send Teresa's video as a file, or you send the file of the presentation to either to me or in the chat, you know.
Sure. Yeah, I request my teammates to please share the video to this organizer. So I will share the screen for the subsequent presentation.
Yeah. So meanwhile, you can maybe keep on sharing, and continue. So just keep Teresa's part, continue with the presentation, and then meanwhile, we'll see how to progress. So thank you, the floor is yours.
So friends, please begin with this Europe.
So yes, Teresa's part was basically introducing what the Arctic region is, and we're going to be comparing different regions to the Arctic. We found the Arctic particularly interesting because none of us knew anything really about it. So we're all starting from scratch. So I'm going to talk about Europe, more specifically the EU. As Teresa would have alluded to in her introduction, Europe as a geographical region, our slides are all going over the place. Europe as a geographical region is a highly influential stakeholder in Arctic policy. 6 of the 8 members of the Arctic Council are European. Geographically, they're very close to each other, and they also have historical colonial ties with indigenous populations in the Arctic being subjected to European policy. So they have this shared history as well. The European Union, as an institution, is the strongest economic and political region in Europe. And that means, again, it's got powerful ties to the Arctic, as 3 EU member states are also in the Arctic Council, and Norway and Iceland, who are not EU members, are very closely linked to the EU through like the EEA or the Schengen Agreement. And interestingly, Iceland has applied previously in the past to become an EU member state. And if that does happen in the future, possibly that would just strengthen the EU's hand in this region. But currently, the EU are very involved in Arctic policy. They have their own Arctic policy, which they produced in 2016 and have since updated it in 2020, which shows that they still want to play an active role. And this is very much a key part of their foreign policy. And if you see the image on the slide there, that's like the pillars of the EU Arctic policy. So there's cooperation, sustainable development, and environmental concerns, which are all very soft power buzzwords. And I think this plays very much into the EU's larger foreign policy framework of being a soft power superpower, if you will. Very much when it comes to the Arctic, they're pushing environmental agendas and regional projects, and interestingly linking that to the lecture we had earlier in the week on the EU. They very much fund these projects, they don't found them. So I found that quite interesting how that linked to our early lectures. But they're very, very powerful in this region, and they tried to get observer status in the Arctic Council in 2013, but they were blocked. And on the surface, it was over seal meat, because Canada and the Arctic region, culturally, seal meat is very acceptable, but for the EU, it's banned. So it was almost like EU trying to impose their cultural norms on the Arctic Council and sort of facilitating their own world order. So it is seemingly, especially to North American countries who are in the minority of the Arctic Council, that the EU is becoming too powerful in this region. But the EU is not the only important player on the European stage when it comes to the Arctic. So I'm going to pass you on to Natalie, who will discuss the UK.
Yep, so to sort of follow on from Catherine's overview of the European stance towards the Arctic region, I'm going to focus more specifically on the British stance. So the British government has continually emphasised a commitment to maintaining a really strong foreign policy presence in the Arctic post-Brexit, which hasn't always been the case, but seems to be the case now. And this stance is centred around two key concerns, the first being the environment and human development, and the second related more to the nascent economic prospects in the region. These aims were outlined in a 2018 policy paper entitled Beyond the Ice, UK Policy Towards the Arctic, which came as a follow-up to the 2013 paper entitled Adapting to Change. Both papers serve to reinforce very similar aims, both advocating that British policy towards the Arctic should reflect three core principles. So these three principles are respect for the rights of Arctic states and peoples, reinforcing leadership of both the Arctic states, as well as promoting British leadership and interests in the region, and promoting cooperation in the Arctic through multi-level dialogue on issues of security and science. The 2018 paper was representative of a strategic refocusing of British priorities towards the Arctic, firstly outlining a heightened need to promote British influence in the region as part of this new Global Britain strategy. Britain has access to new and existing regional cooperation opportunities, especially post-Brexit. So including via the Arctic Council, which Britain has been an observer of since 1998, so only 2 years after it was founded. And additionally, Britain maintains bilateral relations with the Arctic 8 governments and other non-governmental observers, such as Norway, where it has partnerships on research and technology development, and Canada as well. So the UK and specifically Scotland has distinct geographic position vis-a-vis the Arctic, given the proximity of the Shetland Islands to the Arctic Circle. In the foreword to the 2018 paper I mentioned, it was noted by Sir Alan Duncan, who is the Minister of State for the polar regions, that the Shetland capital of Lerwick is actually closer to the Arctic Circle than it is to London. So that kind of shows the geographic interests that specifically Scotland has to the Arctic. And in the wake of Brexit, Scotland has actually used the Arctic as a means of sort of distancing itself from the UK as a devolved nation. So in late 2017, the Scottish Government hosted the Arctic Circle Scotland Forum in Edinburgh, where they identified some policy links between Scotland and the far north. And then they launched their first ever Arctic policy framework in September 2019, entitled Arctic Connections. Arctic Connections prioritises environmental and climate change action, as well as trade and investment in areas like renewable energy. And it also aims to promote Scotland as a marine transport and logistics hub for the High North. So hopefully this has given a brief outline or overview of British foreign policy and how it differs slightly from the European context. And I'll now pass you over to my colleague who will be speaking to you about North America.
But before that, I believe we are in a position to share Teresa's video. I mean, fingers crossed, as ever, but I authorized my browser to share the video and the audio content. So it should work. So you can see hopefully Teresa's video here.
We'll begin by briefly going through the Arctic itself. Then we'll travel around the world and see how other regions position themselves with respect to the Arctic through interregionalisms. Using interregionalism as a framework, we wanted to take a broader look on how external dynamics influence the Arctic region making and why they want to be involved in it. We'll slowly retract from the Arctic distance-wise, so we'll start with Europe, North America, South America, Central Asia, and then on to South Asia. We'll look at these relations using our main variables, the environment, security, and the international law. We chose these factors because they make the Arctic region making really special with its geographical compositions and geopolitics dynamics explained in the coming slides.
So great, could you all hear that? Yes, this is whole victory of the day. Excellent. So thanks much for this, and please do continue with your presentation, and apologies for this interruption, but happy we managed to do this. Thank you.
Okay, hi. I am presenting the perspective of North America, but the first question is why North America and what is North America? The focus of this presentation or think about North America is very complex. There's a theoretical debate, for example, here in Mexico, and I think in North America in general. What is North America and what is the characteristic of this kind of regionalization? But we have to think North America like the Union of the United States, Canada, and we can consider, but for that I am presenting because I am from Mexico. The case of Mexico, since the NAFTA, the agreement of the trade, we have in the case of Mexico. But why North America in this case about the issue of the Arctic? Because it's important to think about this issue in the sense about the security. But I think the security we have to think in two ways. The first way is about the traditional security, the focus on the military situation. In that case, we can think about the history of the North America in the Arctic issue since during the Cold War, because during this time, the sun, the region position as a buffer zone between the two powers in that moment of the Soviet Union and the United States. But then now in the contemporary sense, we can think about the traditional security focus because these superpowers, in particular the United States, for example, keep a strong position about the Arctic issue in the military sense. And now we have the presence of the Russia and China. How has as a threat of in this area of the Arctic. Also because we have the presence of North America bodies, North America military bodies like Coast Guard, Navy, Army, Air Force of Canada, the Federal Public Safety Department, the U.S. Department of Homeland, another kind of the security bodies keep presence in the Arctic. So, but the Arctic is not considered a zone of armed conflict. Arctic nations base military system in the region for the purpose of the national defense, the classical discourse about the traditional security, and also because we have to recognize the illicit activities that there are in the Arctic, particularly the illicit human trafficking, illegal fishing, unregulated mineral extraction. That is one of the main points about the Arctic and why many countries have to intervene in this issue about the richness of the mineral, and also because there are a recognition of the unsafe tourism practice in this area for the melting of the that is produced by the climate change. So for these reasons, we have to think about, in the case of North America, in a traditional security sense, but also there are a recognition that we have to think about the issue of the Arctic in the sense of the security like a complex issue. What I refer when I think in a security like a complex issue, we have to think that now the security is not military sense or the national defense, how is thinking normally related to the security. Now we have to think about the security like as human security, environmental security. So in the North America, there are a recognition that we have to think about that. Why? Because in particular, North America have some issues to think the security like a complex issue. What is that the issues? First, because the defining borders is very is thinking about the national states. No, we reflect during the course that the regions don't respect these borders that is accorded with the nations. The borders in some areas, in the case of Arctic issue, don't respect that borders established or yes, established by the states. So for that, we have to think about the people who live in these areas, in particular about the indigenous people, like the Inuit. I'm sorry, that is indigenous people of the Arctic area. So for that, the North America recognize we have to think about these people, because there are policies, different policies between United States and Canada. Canada have more restriction about these people. Also, because there are some bodies of cooperation, like the CANUS, that is the binational ministerial body known is the CANUS, the Canada of the United States. And also because we have to think about the economic benefits, in particular about the raw materials. The minerals is one of these economic benefits. In particular, uranium, copper, nickel, and iron. That is the resources we found in the Arctic zone, and also because now the maritime routes, if the Arctic scenario change, the maritime routes also change. For that, we have to think. But finally, I want to mention that North America is an equality region. If we think about the United States, Canada, and also if we think about the role of Mexico, we can think that is inequality, because I refer that there are some policies between, in particular, United States and Canada, that there is difference, and also because Mexico doesn't have participation in that in the Arctic issue. For us, are not interested, but there are recognition that Mexico, we have to intervene in these issues. How many countries in the world, because how refer, for example, the theme of the Europe Union about the impact of the climate change. In the case of Mexico, we have to think about the situation of the coast, because if the melting of the Arctic continue, Mexico is a country we have a big impact about that.
That's my part. As you might imagine, South America is not actually involved in the Arctic because of its geographic position. So it's closer to the Antarctic. I'll talk a little bit about the engagements between South America and the Antarctic. It is a region that holds the very strategic position, because Argentina and Chile, they hold the two best gateways to the Antarctic continent. Regarding distance and logistics, and is also a climate change strategic position because of the phenomenon La Niña. As you know, it is a natural phenomenon. When South America is impacted by it, it's called El Niño, and when it is in Australia and New Zealand, it's called La Niña. Its repercussions include drought, problems with crops in agriculture, fishing, and fires, as we have seen the fires in Australia in late 2019. And this is a phenomenon that usually happens during December and January. So that's why South America has been so much involved in the Arctic in that case. You can go to the next one. Chile and Argentina have been the leading states in this regard because of its strategic position, but the other countries have also been increasing their involvement in agreements and multilateral meetings since 1970s, especially. And because of its strategic position, these countries in the region, they have signed many bilateral agreements, especially. And as you can see, most of those, they are North-South cooperations. And even though South America is absent of the Arctic matter, it is closely related with the Antarctic region. So I think it was important to include that, because that justifies that geographic proximity matters in that case. Okay, that's my part. Thank you.
Okay, let me start with the South Asian perspective. Am I audible?
Oh, sorry, I turned off the microphone.
Okay, okay, you can.
Can you say?
Yeah, please.
Sorry. Hello, everybody again, and I want to start about Central Asia from Kazakhstan, because I'm from Kazakhstan, and from 2018 Kazakhstan, I used to use the vast Irtysh River system to gain access to the world's ocean via the Arctic port of Sabet, which is located in Russian Federation. And Kazakhstan hopes to benefit from the rapid growth of Arctic shipping and piggyback along these newly developing trade routes. However, it must tread carefully, as both Russia and China because have vested interests in the region, including the latest Belt and Road Initiative. Because, for example, for right now, Kazakhstan's exciting infrastructure and trade routes and are oriented in an east-west fashion, connecting the country to Europe and Asia via land. But now from this initiative, Kazakhstan will try to develop trading by shipping. And some analysts often predict upcoming Russia-China competition in Central Asia or the Middle East. But from my perspective, the Arctic stands out the most in this regard, because this means that Russia had to reverse its long-standing policy of the Arctic being managed exclusively by the littoral states. With the Chinese presence, the pursuit of regionalization of the Arctic is no longer realistic. So, next slide.
Okay, it's my part. I'm Dr. Anish from India. So I will be talking about South Asian region. And here we have a regional organization, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. Because of the geographic positioning of South Asian countries, we have directly no connection with Arctic region, but still, because of the various initiatives done by SAARC, we are doing wonderful job in climate change mitigation and adaptation. And initially, the SAARC was created for the purpose of economic cooperation, but subsequently from 1989, 1988 onwards, SAARC has expanded its scope and thereby included protection of environment and dealing with climate change within the purview of this particular association. Thereafter, SAARC has taken several measures like Dhaka Declaration and SAARC Action Plan on Climate Change 2008, SAARC Environment Action Plan 1997, then Delhi Statement on Cooperation Environment 2009, Thimphu Statement on Climate Change 2010, SAARC Convention on Cooperation on Environment 2010, SAARC Agreement on Rapid Response to Natural Disasters 2011. And along with various these measures, instruments, SAARC has also collaborated with a number of intergovernmental organizations. Being the leader of South Asian region, SAARC is doing a wonderful job in this level to deal with climate change. But unfortunately, due to the politics and the relationship between these countries involved in this region, most of the time SAARC could not achieve its purpose. Another reason is the technical and financial constraints that has also adversely affected SAARC for achieving the purpose of dealing with climate change. Irrespective of all this, these countries belongs to South Asia having their own action plan for climate change, like India having an action plan, Pakistan having, then Nepal having, etc., etc. So based on their individual action plan also, the countries from this region is contributing well for the mitigation of climate change. That's all from my side. I will pass on to the next speaker.
Anish, would it be possible for you to redo the, represent the PPT, because I don't think it's uploaded. The last changes, the last changes are not showing on this slide. Can
you present it from there?
Yeah, I'll try that. I'll do that. All right. Hi, everyone. Am I audible clearly? I just wanted to check.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I hope you've had a nice travel around the world, and I'm going to just try and quickly summarize what most of my friends have said. So as we were looking at the entire regionalization process in the Arctic region, we observed that it is, of course, a regional security complex, which is built around environmental security and interdependence. And we wanted to understand the interregionalism processes that were going on within the area. So particularly with the EU and the UK, when we see that they're both trying to reiterate their global position within that region, where the EU is trying to push forward its own values, while UK is at this point, post-Brexit, is trying to build up on its global Britain identity. Sorry. Yes, with the case of North America, it is definitely one where we observed currently inequalities in place because Mexico is not being included in part of the discussions and discourses, which is where both Canada and America, US, are part of the Arctic Council. With South America, what an interesting thing we observed that it has more interest in Antarctic instead of the Arctic. So definitely what it suggests is that, yes, proximity does play a role. But if we look at the role of South America now in promoting regionalism within the Antarctic, then does it suggest, it gives us a question actually to ponder upon that. Does this indicate for a polar regionalism within our world order in terms of an Arctic regionalism and an Antarctic regionalism? That's something for us to think about. And when we look at South Asia as well as Central Asia, it presents a very interesting perspective and again, a set of questions because we see three prominent actors here, Russia, China, and India, independent actors who are pushing forward an agenda of with their investments in oil and gas particularly, while at the same time striving for climate change initiatives. So that's kind of a contradiction. But the fact that three independent countries are kind of pushing forward an agenda, it's also a trend contrary to how most regions have been built using regional integration organizations. And so then does this whole narrative around the Arctic enable us to really think about a more, if each of these regions are promoting certain norms in order to establish these regions? So that's an important question it leaves us with. And yeah, I think that brings us to the end of our presentation. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. I'll open the floor for questions or remarks.
That's great, Akorshi, and the whole team. This was a fascinating and insightful presentation on a region that may be a region or maybe not, depending on what sort of lenses you adopt, right? The Arctic may not necessarily spring to mind as an example of a region, right? Some of you may actually think of it as more of an environmental complex or a geopolitical arena. So the regionalist approach to the Arctic was, I believe, very insightful and very, very original. Well done to you all. And I was also glad that we could play Teresa's video. It would have been a pity to leave that out. And I was also very impressed by the coverage you gave of all the relations with the Arctic, right? All the way down to Central Asia and South America. So fantastic job. Thanks, everyone. Any questions or comments from the audience? I believe, again, the presentation gave a lot of food for thought in terms of how regions operate widely. So let me close the chat meanwhile so I can open the participants list and see the hands up. Firdaus, I can see your hand up. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, hi. Am I audible?
You are.
Okay, great. I have a question to a speaker that presented the section about the EU, or probably to the whole group. She said that Iceland applied for the accession into the EU. I was wondering why, given the fact that Iceland is proponent of all those democratic principles, liberal values, and overall shares the European kind of identity in Europe. Why wasn't Iceland admitted into the EU?
So yes, I can take this question. It wasn't about them not being admitted. They began the process but froze their application due to domestic reasons, I'm not sure, but they're one of those countries which are kind of like on the watch list for who could potentially join the EU in the future. But they weren't rejected, it's just they applied and then decided later to freeze their application. So currently nothing's happening on that front, but no one's been rejected or anything like that.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Firdausi, for bringing up that point. Any questions or further comments? Otherwise, I have a very, very quick one, but I would rather give the floor to Omair. I can see his hand up. So Omair, please.
Yes, Professor, thanks. So my question is from Catherine, as she was highlighting the role of Arctic policy with the other member like Norway and Iceland. So my question is about how do you see the Arctic policy in post-Brexit era? Because I haven't go through the Arctic policy, but I reckon that the fishing is one of the most important area the Arctic countries want to highlight, because during the Brexit, when the case was going on, the UK has forced and they retreated that they don't want to change the fishing policy in the Arctic Circle, because as we all know that the Norway, Iceland and UK benefits a lot from the fishing in the Arctic Circle. So what's your point on that in the post-Brexit scenario? Thanks.
To be honest, I'm not the most knowledgeable on fishing issues. However, I think Britain's sort of stance on the Arctic and why Catherine and I decided to split the EU topic in terms of EU and Britain was because Britain has really tried to sort of redefine its role, not only towards the Arctic, but just generally in the world, sort of in this post-Brexit scenario. So what they've sort of tried to do, especially with their Arctic policy, which I found quite interesting, was they're sort of taking a very similar stance to that of the EU, but sort of redefining it in terms of a global Britain and a Britain as a world leader on its own as a standalone entity. I'm not sure if that really answers your question very well or not, but feel free to tell me if it doesn't.
Thank you, Natalie, for this. No worries at all, judging from what's happening in current politics. You're not the only one who doesn't understand fishing rights fully. So certainly no one expects you to give a comprehensive answer on that. In fact, I quite liked the way in which you split the European part of your presentation between British and even a stress on Scottish foreign policy towards the Arctic, which may not be immediate, right? So that was, in my opinion, quite original and very well performed. So thanks much to all of you. I have a very final quick question before moving to the next group, which is the following. The Arctic wasn't born yesterday as a region or as an area of war politics, right? The Arctic has been there since, decades and centuries, and especially during the Cold War, the Arctic was the theater of confrontation, skirmishes, and weak but nonetheless existent dialogue between the two superpowers, right? The USSR and the Soviet Union and the US. Is actually the Arctic the geographical place in which the two countries are actually the most proximate, interestingly enough. So what does, in your opinion, explain all the recent hype with the Arctic? Now we seem to have a lot of books and articles and commentaries and newspaper articles on the Arctic, right? The Arctic is a pretty fashionable area in war politics. Why now? Why wasn't this the case 20 years ago, in your opinion?
I have personally found from just listening to everyone else in my group and also my own research on the EU, it seems to primarily be quite an environmental focus. I think the sort of rise in environmentalism has combined with the rise in interest in the Arctic, especially for a lot of powers. Like I was talking about the EU, soft power is becoming a very, very big thing on the world stage. And I think it looks good to be interested in the Arctic because it means that you're interested in environmental concerns. So from my point of view, I would say environmentalism has a lot to play in that, but there's probably a whole host of other factors.
No, I think I would very much agree with you, Catherine. From what I was reading, it was very much sort of investment in renewables and trying to sort of become a world leader in terms of like climate strategy and things as well. I think that's sort of led to a very renewed interest in issues related to the Arctic, but there are probably other reasons too, which I'm sure the rest of the group can enlighten everyone on.
I wanted to add in here, particularly with this regard, because I think in the recent time, as we see how the diffusion of regionalism is actually taking place, particularly the EU regionalism, which has been spreading across, if we see that, this is a form of, actually it's a question, could this be a form of neocolonialism in fact? Because now that most of these regions have sustained or have developed a regional identity of their own, the only way to ascertain their position within the context of global governance is having presence in more and more regions. And this particularly Arctic happens to be one of, is it right to say, hotspot for energy and security, which are primary concerns when it comes to any sort of regional integration initiatives. And so perhaps we are seeing this new momentum of initiatives, papers and studies, and actual focus of people within that region.
Yeah, so thanks much for this as well. Sorry, I was keeping an eye on the chat as well, where there are some contributions as well on this idea of the Chinese polar Silk Road that some of you might have heard of before, but also some of you might have not. So alongside this BRI project, there is also this polar Silk Road that signals, of course, a geopolitical and environmental interest. And thank you much for all these contributions. It was fantastic, absolutely. Very original, very fresh presentation. So thank you all for this. Without any further ado, especially because we are running slightly for once behind schedule, I would hand it over to the next group. So on my list, I have group 1, and after that, we will have group 5. So the floor is yours, group 1, whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Professor. Ecuador, would you do the honor to share the screen? Thank you very much. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone that who are present here in the final day of the summer school. Ecuador, if you would return to the previous slide, the cover page. Thank you. It is my honor and privilege to introduce you to Group 1's presentation. As part of my remarks on the outset, I would like to express my gratitude to my group members who has invested their time, effort in preparing the contents of this presentation day in and day out since the second day of the summer school. I should like to also extend my thanks to professors and the organizer of the summer school who have spent their time and day work in making this meaningful program happening. And this is a testament that COVID-19 pandemic cannot barricade our desire to acquire new insights and achieving interconnectedness. All right, so without further ado, I will now address the topic of today's presentation. Our topic concerns the comparative regionalism on North America's United States, Mexico, Canada Agreement, USMCA, and the East Asia, ASEAN China Free Trade Area, ACFTA, great powers in regional free trade agreements. Next slide, please. Right, so the topic will be elaborated under 5 sections. Namely, the first section is an overview of the East Asia and North America region, where Daniel will explain how do these agreements constitute as a region. And the second one will be addressed by me, where I address the 2 contradicting theory of international relations, namely realism and liberalism. The third part will be presented by Meral and Diana, who will be explaining the rationale for cooperation, where they try to apply the 2 theories in the context of the 2 regionalism. The comparative part and the most important part will be addressed by Drew, who will make a content analysis on the country's commitment to the agreement. There, Drew will draw our attention to see between the 2 agreements, which agreement possess higher level of regionalism. And it will conclude it with recommendations. Without further ado, I would like to now yield the floor to Daniel. Daniel, are you here? Please take the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to start on this question. How do these agreements constitute a region? As a number of states linked together, so this is how we define a region, as a number of states linked together by geographical proximity and by a degree of mutual interdependence. So both as an ontology and level of analysis, the 2 free trade agreements are active in international treaties. As level analysis, these FTAs bring together the number of states through increasing economic integration, the movement of both goods and people. Regarding the USMCA and ACFTA, I would like to say that all member states are geographically linked and interconnected through trade ties. Both are actively enforced and continually updated. And the FTAs have lowered tariff on trade goods, lowered barriers to services, and have enacted means to increase cross-border investment. This enhances the interconnectivity of member states. Example of both regionalism through state-led processes and regionalization through people-led processes, largely as a result of business ties. Slide. So at this level, I give background on USMCA. And as you can see, there's another slash, and this is related to the North American Free Trade Agreements. So this first agreement between the North American states entered into force in January 1994. It's composed of Canada, Mexico, and the United States. So the purpose of these agreements was to reduce or eliminate the tariff of most products between the 3 member states and the regional trade trouble under the agreement and cross-border investments. After that, there will be a shift. The NFTA will be transformed into USMCA. Slide. So this shift is caused by the protest of population of workers who denounce the NFTA. And so opposition to the NFTA was significant within the United States, with figures such as presidential candidate Ross Perot saying that in 1992, that would lead to a giant stink around the US jobs. So most recently, this position was expressed by President Trump, who viewed this agreement as a worst trade agreement. So the shift was based on the criticism, not only from the population, but also the president of the US. And this shift intervened in a context in which the American foreign policy has really changed, because you know that Trump criticized some of international treaties. You remember that he retreated from the Paris Agreement. He also denounced the attitude of the World Health Program, the World Health Organization. And during this Trump presidency, we realized that the US wanted to promote a kind of isolation in the international area. So the fact of considering a new agreement, it lies in this same view of Trump to reconsider some of the key agreements that the US was linked to. And this USMCA promotes the interests of the US. Slide. So we highlighted the major changes within the agreement. And the first one is it creates more level playing fields for American workers. It's important. Secondly, it benefits American farmers, ranchers, and agro businesses by modernizing and strengthening food and agriculture trades in North America. It also supports a 21st century economy through new protection for US intellectual property and ensuring opportunity for trades in US services. But let me mention that this agreement did not only benefit, because we can say that as the US is a great power, and because of political and diplomatic strength, this agreement could only benefit the US, but this agreement did not only benefit the US, it also benefits Mexico, and Mexico was the one who signed, who approved these new agreements. And the president, so the president, Andres Manuel Lopez, said that this agreement would be good for job creation, trades, and foreign policy investment. So this is the few things that I would like to underline on this first slide. Regarding the ACFTA, this is the first agreement signed in 2002, which established a framework for developing further trade ties between China and the Asian Economic Community. And the member states include Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, and you can read it on the PowerPoint. There are 3 sub-agreements under the ACFTA: the Asian-China Trade in Good Agreement, the Agreement on Trade Services, and the Investment Agreement. These all function to reduce tariff, decrease service barriers, and promote cross-border investment. And I think very interesting thing to bear in mind that China, as you know, a great power in terms of military, but also in terms of economic power, was ranked as the Asian largest investor over the last decades. So we can imagine the role that China is playing in this region. The FCA may be integrated into a regional comprehensive economic partnership if enough signatories ratify it, which will consolidate most Asian FTAs into Asian Pacific FTA. Slide. So we established kind of statistical comparison between the region, the North American region with the USMCA and the ASFTA. So first of all, we have the population side. We have also the GDP side that you have on the screen, and you can see. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Hello, everyone. It's me again, and I will be responsible for the theoretical frameworks, the scrutiny of yin and yang, realism and liberalism in international relations. Right, so in this part, we look at the 2 theory, right? In the effort to studying power, actor, and the order in international relations, scholars always entail the application of theoretical views that derive from distinctive school of thoughts, including but not limited to realism and liberalism. So if yin and yang really exist, right? If yin and yang correlation or concept does exist in the international relations, then liberalism and realism would be the ones. Right? These 2 theories are so contradicting, and given their contradicting characteristic and nature and their essence in the international relations, our group has decided to deploy the 2 theories to access the comparison between the USMCA and the ACFTA regionalism. Without further ado, I will introduce you to the framework of realism. Of course, when it comes to realism as a theory, the school of thoughts, there are many strands, there are many branches that we should scrutinize. But then, due to the interest of the time, our group have picked 3 core values that is of relevance to our presentation today, namely zero-sum game, balance of power, and hegemony. Right, so the concept of zero-sum game is somewhat linked to the game theory. So if one side wins, the other side must lose, right? So the most suitable way that state could maintain or retain its power is to increase it's to maximize and to ensure that that particular state is powerful and self-reliant. And therefore, the game of international politics revolve around the cliffs of the pursuits of power to acquiring it, increasing it, projecting it, and using it to bend others' will in accordance with your interests. Therefore, realists believe that states only make treaties on the basis of their interests, right? And therefore, the so-called regionalism, right, is merely a form of blanket that withholds the members' national interests. And the states will only form alliance because of fear and because of common interest or common threats, right? For example, ASEAN. ASEAN is an association that was originally built on the bedrock of security, the containment of communism in Southeast Asia, for example. The second concept is the balance of power as an equilibrium. What is balance of power? To put it simply, balance of power is when one state, right, the rise of one state can pose a threat to the existence of another, right? That state resides in the anarchic world, right? The world that there is no central government. There is a struggle for power, right? The international system is but a self-help system, and therefore state need to seek power through be it military or alliance, right, in order to ensure its survivability. Right, in balance of power here, I will address the one of the strands of realism, that is defensive realism, which divides two types of balancing. We have the internal balancing and external balancing. Internal balancing is a way in which states maximize its power, its domestic power, through the exploitation of resources in order to accumulate it into material power, right? External balancing refers to the way in which state interacts with another state as a result of fear in order to forge alliance, right, to balance with the bigger states. Right, the last concept that we have brought about is hegemony. So states need to have the preponderance of power. So since the world is full of anarchy, states need to increase their power in order to make them survive, right? So some states, for example, the US or China, right, want to dominate the world and becomes the most powerful country in the international system. It's the hegemonic supremacy we are talking. So security and power are of paramount importance in this regard. Next slide, please. Thank you. Next, we scrutinize the concept of liberalism. We also address three core values of liberalism: the idea of absolute gains, economic interdependence, and international cooperation. Absolute gains is, I should say, 180 degrees different from the idea of zero-sum game, because there is no loser or winner, right? Each of the participants will obtain sort of benefits. So absolute game theory looks at the total effect, the compromising power, the security, the economic and cultural effects of a particular state's action. It views and emphasizes the prospect for cooperation rather than plunging a state into war or conflict. Right, and the next core value is economic interdependence, where liberal advance that economic interdependence lowers the likelihood of war by increasing the value of trade over alternative aggression. So removing the barriers to trade, right, increase the market access between country to another, states would be better off. In this situation, states view that there are alternative ways to maximize their power other than going to war, because war itself, after all, is very costly. The third part is international cooperation. International cooperation here is the synthesis of the two concepts of absolute gains and economic interdependence, which highlights on the focus on promoting and maintaining the international cooperation. So state in this regard, we work together in order to achieve the fruit of cooperation, and therefore will all of them will result in will obtain benefit, right? So the cooperation does not means a counter to self-interest, but rather a collective action, right, which is provided under the form of public goods, right? So to liberalism, then, regionalism is a form of states cooperation in pursuit of peace and economic interest, whereby it encourages the free flow of trades and goods and services, because the more you trade is the more you gain. After all, trade makes people better off. So I think that's it for my part. I will now give the floor to Meryl. Please take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Moni. Hi, guys. So my part is rationals for cooperation. Next slide, please. And in this part, we will cover political aspects of regional integration and economic aspects. Firstly, I would like to start with offshore balancing, which is a realist perspective that permits a great power to maintain its power without the cost of large military, which means that it combines different hegemonies with the balance of power among them. And according to scholars, the balanced domination of different superpowers in international politics creates more gains than a threat. And after the Cold War, the US had 4 policy choices to establish a big hegemon, and one of them was offshore balancing. Currently, offshore balancing for the United States advocates withdrawing the US military forces from overseas based on preserving its power and influence in Western Hemisphere, and it's an example of UCMCA. Even though UCMCA is a trade agreement with lack of military threat in it, it's important for the US to establish peaceful reputation to maintain strong relations with Canada and Mexico. And for Chinese case, it also entails seeking a rough balance between the power of regions in the fields of space and cyberspace and international institutions. Since with the growing technological boom in Japan and South Korea, it is important for China to have a balance with its neighbors. And it's important to note that offshore balancing are more effective when the power of hegemony is declining. As you can see on the table, the possibility of anarchy among hegemonies might create security threat for them. So while offshore balancing aims to peacefully resolve hegemon disputes. Next slide, please. And second political perspective is the facilitation of diplomatic and political relations. This perspective was influenced by the establishment of European coal and steel community by neo-functionalist scholars that proposed to firstly develop the economic integration amongst the member states and then develop regional and political integration. This idea in the case of ACFTA seeks for economic cooperation, where China aims to prove commitment to a peaceful rise as a great power, since strong diplomatic and political ties to its southern neighbors in Southeast Asia additionally reduces the number of threats China faces in its region, and it reduces the chances of China being isolated from its neighbors as Japan or South Korea. In the case of UCMCA, through economic cooperation, U.S. seeks stronger its ties with Canada and Mexico. This strengthens the U.S.-Canada relationships and provide more opportunities for the U.S. to work with Mexico regarding the refugee issues. These trades ties additionally provide incentives for both Canada and Mexico to prioritize their relationships with the U.S. Rather than with China, that might be a potential hegemony threat to the U.S. Thank you. I will turn my move to Diana.
All right, so now I'm going to cover economic aspects of the presentation. So, and how small states can reap the benefits from greater powers. In the terms of economic interest, so by doing hands with great powers, the trade and free trade agreements with them of the desire for small states to ensure its survival. And a trade with a superpower will open its door of opportunity to trade with others, with other members as well. So a small state alone cannot develop themselves unless with the help of great powers and backing them up. And the great power will, for example, will open the market for small states to export their goods and services. In terms of foreign policy, there is a very often tend to believe that the foreign policy of small states is more greatly influenced by the international system rather than the domestic politics challenging. This way, neoliberalism and adding that foreign policy of bigger states tends to be more influenced by the domestic politics. So, from the point of economic diplomacy, as realists state that the world is anarchic, and in the anarchic and self-help international system, the change in the balance of power, great powers, are taken to determine the policies of small states. Domestic role is less significant than international system for small states because they are mainly affected by it. Neo-realists argue that small states will adopt balancing behavior in the wake of structural shifts in the balance of power. So in contrast, others argue that small states favor anti-balance of power behavior, so-called bandwagoning, which they are characterized by the demands of the more powerful actors. So in our case, the small states will align with its policy and become the satellite to great power, just like what Mexico and Canada did to the US and ASEAN countries did to China. Next slide, please. And of course, perhaps the most conventional objective thought to underlie countries' participation in any trade negotiation is the idea that through this reciprocal exchanges of concessions on trade barriers, there will be improvements in market access from which all parties to negotiation will benefit. However, the mainstream, or first-tier schools of IR also differentiate between relative gains versus absolute gains, where neoliberal institutionalism assumes that states are primarily concerned with absolute gains, also emphasizing the prospect of cooperation, while structural realism states quite opposite and believes that the states are concerned only with relative gains and also emphasize the prospect of conflict. So if we apply this views to the agreements that we have presented today, so the benefits and costs of AFCTA are distributed unequally, especially among Asian states. Some scholars came to conclusion that, for example, Indonesia, which had the highest GDP, and Singapore, which had the highest level of economic development, gained smaller percentage of welfare improvements. And other factors also makes the general distribution effect of the agreement sometimes very confusing. So this underlines the distributive gains and losses that near-least arguments usually support for. And also it's not very clear who will gain more from the formation and development of this agreement. And I would like to pass on the floor to the next speaker.
Hello, so I'm going to go over very quickly now the systems of operation within these free trade agreements, particularly the level of commitment that each member state has to have. So within the ACFTA, there are three primary sub-agreements. None of these have an enforcement mechanism. So there's a lesser degree of commitment there, is that these states are not able to be punished for not agreeing with these with the requirements. And within the USMCA, there's recently, this past year, implemented a slight enforcement mechanism. There is no way for them to really enforce it, but there is able to be pressure put on each non-compliant member state by the other states through a series of mediation agreements. Now, within additional levels of these commitments, the ACFTA has more member states, which means that there's more opportunity for conflict between them than in the USMCA, which has only 3 member states. And that allows for a greater level of commitment within the USMCA, as each state has to be committed for it to be a sustainable agreement. Within the ACFTA, China is a major economic player and has been able to provide a significant amount of benefits for the developing economies of ASEAN, as they're able to contribute to their economic development and can gain greater access to investments. Within the USMCA, it's a similar situation, although the US takes the role and is particularly supporting the development of Mexico. Next slide, please. So in this slide, we're going to go over a bit of the different levels of regionalism and regionalization. So for our purposes, we are primarily going to be looking at A, B, and E on this. So regionalism, a state-led process, mainly focusing on the economic gains and benefits of integration. Regionalization, which is a people-based process of forming a region mainly focused on both informal and formal relations and societal integration. And that regions are frequently defined as groups of countries located in the same geographic space. So next slide, please. On this slide, we're going to be going over the definitions and where each of these free trade agreements fits within them. So both of them have member states that are located in the same geographic area. So in a geographic sense, we can certainly define them as a region. And within the USMCA, there's both a state-driven process and a more sub-government level process with organizations such as the US Chamber of Commerce, heavily supporting the integration into first NAFTA and then into the USMCA. So this represents that public-private partnership within the US, that societal and political connection, and indicates both a level of regionalism and regionalization, whereas in the ACFTA, primarily in the Great Power of China is what we're looking at, we were not able to find any sub-governmental organization that was pushing this policy. It was primarily a state-driven process. So it showcases a process of regionalism, but not of regionalization. So I will turn this over to Maricelen for the conclusion and our recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. So our conclusion is that over the last few decades, we observed an increasing trend towards regionalism in both North America and Southeast Asia. Both USMCA and ACFTA play an important role for great powers in terms of economic and political power. The trends of regionalism and regional economic organization may balance the rise of protectionism in international system. However, it's important to note that internal politics of countries may affect regional economic organization such as USMCA, RCEP, or ACFTA negatively, and may promote disruption among member states, especially when there is a hegemony in it. And both USMCA and ACFTA should be cautious when moving forward with additional integration efforts so as to reduce the possibility for internal tensions. Thank you so much. Sorry for the delay. Thank you.
Thank you much for this. In fact, you were very much within your time. So if there has been any delay, that has been somehow marginal. And it was a very sophisticated and complex analytical and theoretically grounded presentation, which I think should mean that you are all to be commended for this effort to put the intellectual and theoretical background behind your presentation, and especially the comparison between the two cases. I like very much how you also clarified at the very beginning how free trade areas and economic agreements can be conceptualized as regions, right? That I believe showed a very deep engagement with the material of the summer school, because one can argue that not every single trade agreement would lead necessarily to the formation of a region. So even if one can agree or disagree with you, I believe that showing awareness of these complexities adds points and, if you wish, weight, okay, and clarity to your presentation. So that was great. Thanks much. Any questions from the audience, or even comments or points to clarify? Let me open the participants list to see any hands up. Okay, so maybe let me ask a very quick question, and I do imagine this will require a far complex answer, so please feel free to keep it short and just to share your initial ideas. World order seems to be undergoing some patterns of change, and great power competition seems to be increasing. So in the light of the theoretical analysis you produced and what you told us, what do you think is the future of these trade agreements? Will they hold these current challenges? Will there be any profound changes in their composition? Or should we expect some status quo, and that despite the acrimony between US and China, things will stay nonetheless in their own place? Any insights on this? Anyone?
I think, I mean, speaking from my personal views, I think I would side much more with the theory of liberalism that we presented here, in that not necessarily that it would necessarily lead to heightened integration, but at least that it would be able to sustain these trade agreements, and that they should be at least somewhat helpful for preventing future heightened conflict.
I think that these agreements, mainly the USMCA, is sustainable because all the players actively supported the birth of this agreement, mainly Mexico, who was one of the proponents of this agreement. So based on the provisional agreements, we just and the speech, the declaration of the members confirm that they are happy with that. They are happy with the agreement, but the agreement depends on the people. If maybe we have another president, he can say that this agreement is not good, as Trump said in 2020. He said that, oh, this agreement is not good, I'm going to change it. It's very worse. So as long as the people of the leadership support the agreement, it can remain stable. But if there is another leadership, it can change.
I would associate myself, but more distinctively from the camp of liberalism. I would say that realism somehow got a point here, because there are some parts where liberalism can't explain. For example, the existence of trade war in the region itself. We have the US and Canada went to trade war on several occasions, right? And that, to many analysts believe that such trade wars would, from time by time, render the regression of relationship between the latter. And also, realism sees that economic interdependence by dint of free trade area would create something called asymmetric vulnerability. Like this asymmetric vulnerability open the gap of inequality between states. So it's a situation where country falls behind one another. If you look at Canada, Canada is also an emerging economy, very contiguous to the US, right? So Canada, if we ask, is Canada of satisfaction when the US is leading so far ahead? Canada is not. And Mexico is another thing. There are political interference out there, the construction of wall, for example, the issue of refugees and migrants, that also barricade the inflow of trade. And if you look at the case of China with ASEAN, my personal view have reflects me to understand that the relationship between the two bilateral partners are somewhat based on the political economy, I should say. So China actually is surrounded by the so-called US barricading chain out there. And in order to, China see Southeast Asia, ASEAN, as a strategic region where it can assert its economic power, right, where it can exploit the labor and stuff. So these would be in turn, right, accumulate China's power in terms of military, because most of, if you look at the way in which China spend their national budget, is most of the time situated in the military sector, for example. So I would say I would associate myself with realists in this regard. But then again, it is my personal perspective. Thank you very much.
Of course, thanks much for this. And I like how this question open up different perspectives and ideas with respect to these free trade agreements and how they operate. Also, this fits nicely with the next and last presentation by Group 5, because they will also touch on the issue of theory and regionalism. So we will delve into this as well. So without any further ado, I would like to thank once again Group 1 for their great presentation. Thank you much for this. And over to Group 5 for the next and last presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll start sharing my screen. Could you please just let me know whether you see the full screen mode?
Yes, and we can hear you well.
Excellent. Then I invite Dinara. Sorry, Dinara, are you there? Dinara?
Maybe muted or...
There's some technical issue because I see that she is not muted.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps it's some technical setup.
Is there any chance that you can proceed and then she jumps in as we did with a couple of other presentations? Because I can see she's trying probably now to log in again.
Okay, then I see that she's back. Dinara? Okay, perhaps then I'll just quickly proceed, not with the very first slide, but with the subsequent, the second one, the second question. And then perhaps we can go back to the theoretical standing at the very end. Rishabh and John, would you like to present?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I would like to get the confirmation that you can hear my voice properly.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So my name is John Santre from Indonesia. Dear fellow participants, on the question of the future of regionalism, this group discussion result a healthy and dynamic debate. There were dissenting opinions, agreement, disagreement, but all of that comes from a good place, pluralism and versatility of knowledge and academic background. First of all, we realize that given the tendency of democratic backsliding in Europe, we are witnessing it in the status quo of Hungary, with the passage of the law effectively removing any oversight and silencing any criticism of the Hungarian government, the Prime Minister Viktor Orban can now rule by decree of an indefinite period of time. That such an erosion of democracy could happen openly in the heart of Europe has caused an uproar with many questioning what, if anything, the European Union can do to stop one of its own from undermining the very values that underpin the bloc. And these occurrences has been happening in many countries all over the world. The persistence of authoritarian regimes is taking its strand, and the future of the regionalism may be jeopardized. Next, I would like to move on to the effect of growing influence of China and its Belt and Road Initiative projects that may hinder further regional integration in Euro-Asian space, since each country gravitates more and most likely to the economic cooperation with China. Moreover, it should be pointed out that other countries have chosen to join BRI, not just impoverished nation. The BRI has reached not only Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, but also East Asia and Europe. Over 18 European Union countries have joined the BRI. In Asia, South Korean firms Daewoo and Hyundai have won contracts along the BRI. And also Nissan Corp shipped its first rail-bound cargo transshipment to Europe via China's Sinotrans in October 2018. This massive and rapid pace of participation is said to be justified as an effort to improve their connectivity to the rest of the world and level up their industrialization. But the real agenda behind it still remains to be questioned. And as a counterbalance to that US recent announcement, we all know that as conflicts between United States and China appear to mount, some experts have questioned the intention of China's infrastructure build up across the span of the Belt and Road Initiative. The BRI has been viewed as a debt trap for impoverished states and a means for China to expand its territorial control. However, America's free and open Indo-Pacific strategy, or certain by FOIP, is not as familiar as the BRI. The US announced it in 2017 to counterbalance the China BRI, but the VOIP has three pillars: security, economics, and governance. Although there are significant overlaps between VOIP and the BRI, coordination between US and China is not likely due to mutual hostility. In the same breath, we also discuss how Russia utilized regionalism and the Euro-Asia Economic Union to try to project influence internationally. As one of our group members stated that inserting a national agenda in the level of a region was commonly known as a nature of regionalism. However, domination from a single country could lead to could lead to the objective of region to only limited, can be utilized by only limited and certain individual advantages. The greater good purpose of the region will shift to a state-centric oriented. Regardless of our study and our nationality background, as myself as well as a law student, I think we all can mutually agree on this take. That's all from me. For the next points, please welcome Rishabh from India. Thank you.
Thank you, John. First of all, I would like to apologize. Due to some network issues, my camera is not working. So I'll just be on the audio mode. And taking further the problems that the future of regionalism would face, we see that there is rise of other groups like the Turkic Council, which is a communion of the Turkic language speaking countries in the region. And what is this doing is it is forming as a counterbalance to the already existing regional powers. We move forward and we see that in the South China Sea region, we see that there are already some of the coalitions formed, like the ASEAN and the SAARC, which acts as a counterbalance to the pervasive and extensive interference of China in this region. So we see that there is a coalition of countries, and the reason because these countries come together to form a regional identity is that in some ways we see that these small countries, they're not so much rich in their mineral resources, or they're not able to provide the security for themselves. So they need to form an alliance with the neighboring countries so that they can ensure free market trade, the economic development, the security of their nation. So we see that there are already some of the institutions, regional institutions, that are working in the South China Sea region as well as the southern part of Asia. And all of this are working to curb the problem of expansionism of China. Moving forward, we also see that the reason behind the growing of regionalism could be the weakening of state sovereignties and desire for countries to improve economic competitiveness. We see that each and every country has a will, a need to communicate and have a communion with other countries to form an economic alliance to grow in this world of globalization. We also see that these countries want to develop in such a way that the regional identity can grow and they can grow along with them. We see that they want to trade more and more, and they want to trade in a preferential way so that they can trade between countries which are friendly to them, which are a part of their regional community, so that they can develop among themselves and counterbalance the relations with the other groups which are already forming in the regions. The next thing that we see is that due to globalization and rise in technology, like we have very social media sites and other technology-driven companies which are working in throughout the world and in many nations. And with the coming of countries to form a regional identity, we see that there is a great need of legal development in the legal system so that they can tackle the problems that can come in their way due to the constitutional setup, the legal setup, or giving an example of the problems that India is facing right now with Twitter can also be an example of such legal issues. And we see that John has put up this idea that the Anti-Corruption Commission should be taken into consideration to understand this point further. So that's it from my side. And for the next slide, I would like to call Firdaus. Thank you.
Yes, am I audible? If we are not sure that we can go back to the first slide, I can proceed with this one. It's okay?
Yes, that's great. Please proceed.
Yeah, I mean,
excuse me, hello, Zena, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, perfect. I don't know what was the trouble. Can I go back to the first slide, slide number 1?
Yes, okay.
Is it okay now?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, excuse me for some networking. So greetings to all listeners, to all organizers of the summer school. Our group would like first of all to say thank to Dr. Felipe Boronelli for the excellent coordination and the significant recommendations to our mini research for today and our presentation. And of course, thanks to Zena for the excellent moderation of our group and making the presentation slides. So we are group number 5, and we prepared presentation and try to answer 3 main questions. This is about what is the best theory to explain regionalism? Will regionalism continue in the future? And what the difficulties are of setting of up regional integration? So according to the first question, our participants identified the following theories. Neo-functionalism and intergovernmentalism. The state acts as a vector of activity of various interest groups, form society, and the politics is a kind of market where interest groups compete with each other. And intergovernmentalism theorists view integration as a response to changes in the balance of power. Theory number 2, it is a neorealism, and it's about international relations are reviewed as an integral system functioning in accordance with certain laws. And here, the main actors are states and their unions. And here, participants, they focused this theory as Russia's power in the region of Central Asia. Next one, the theory number 3, neoliberalism, shows as a fundamental similarity with globalization, especially in the economic sphere. So under these conditions, state interests begin to play an important but no longer paramount role. Thank you. And Zena, I give words to you.
Yes. And I think now within this sequence, my remarks come very timely just before we proceed with the final question, because many items that will be discussed by Firdevs and Charlie touch upon these 2 last theoretical standpoints that also fed into our discussions. So first of all, it's historical new institutionalism, which is part of a broader family of neo-institutionalisms. And here we would like to outline specifically the focus on path dependencies. So what earlier developments and historical processes define in terms of the actors, organizations, and states' motivations and perspectives about the future developments. And the last one is constructivist approaches that identify and self-other discourses can explain how regions define themselves as distinct. For example, with Central Asian regionalism defining itself as a separate from great powers. And now I give the floor to Firdevs to address the last question.
Thank you, Zane. So as I started, so we have looked into the theoretical framework and discussed the question of whether there is a future for the regionalism. But in order to understand the regionalism and its future, we have to figure out if there are any difficulties. So in the group discussion, we had a variety of diverse opinion, and also some debate came up. So I will just list the points here, and I think that one of the main difficulty towards the establishment of the regional integration can be the fear of the country to lose their sovereignty. What I mean here is that if we take the case of the Central Asian state, they gained their independence quite recently, just 30 years ago. So they show no willingness, no intention to give away their sovereignty. And the best example here about the shared sovereignty of the states comes under the European Union, where the states give away half of their sovereignty to the supranational institution. This is called shared competency, where some of the policies are taken by the decision of the supranational institution, the Commission and the Parliament. And this is something that the Central Asian states do not want to do. And this also shows the reluctance of Tajikistan and Uzbekistan into entering the Euro-Asian Economic Union for the fear that their sovereignty will be lost. So another point here is that the hegemonic aspiration of the regional power, and again, in the context of Central Asia or Eurasia, we have two main powers. One is Russia, another is China. Russia wants to, based on its historical kind of connections with the region, it always, some scholars even support this, my argument that Russia wants to maintain its dominance in the region as it did during the Soviet era. And China, with its growing economic influence through the BRI projects that it implements throughout Central Asia and Eurasia, it may not kind of facilitate the further integration among the Central Asian states. The third point here is that we live, I believe that we live in a realist, IR, if we, in terms of IR theories, we live in a realist envisioned world when every country pursues its own foreign interests, national interest and foreign affairs. And countries like Tajikistan and Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, they adhere to multi-vector foreign policy. And it implies that they kind of, they rather deal with external actors individually than united, because it all comes to the economy and it all comes to the money and investment. So I think that everyone is kind of interested to gain the benefits on their own. So, and I hypothesize that there can probably arise an adversary or conflict between regional integration. Here, I mean the competing regionalism, like we see the growing number. For the last decades, we have the new regions coming up, like that can contest the European Union, for example. And as the more we have those kind of integration, the messier it will become. And the last point of mine is that the countries that belong to a certain region, which is can be deemed to be prone to regionally integrate, is that each country is a member of various of other organizations, be it regional or international. So even in the case of Tajikistan, one of the reasons that Tajikistan does not join the Eurasian Economic Union is that it has the conflicting provisions, conflicting terms with the WTO, to which it is a member. So in order to join the Eurasian Union, it needs to make some changes that would go against the the terms it kind of agreed to under the WTO arrangement. So yeah, these are my points, and I give the floor to Charlie to move on and finish the presentation. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. So my section has been grouped together in a sort of comparative perspective to the European Union, which is often seen as the be-all and end-all for regionalism and integration. But some of these points demonstrate why we should move away from the Eurocentric view, as Dr. Buranelli was talking about in his presentation. So one example of barriers to integration, which Amira rightly pointed out, were tensions between states in the Asia-Pacific region, the most notable being conflicts in the South China Sea. These have been crucial in preventing perhaps Asian integration, as states within regional groups have different interests, but also Chinese involvement within that prevents China becoming part of this grouping, but also requires alignment on the issue from other states, which can cause tension and lead to conflicts. So this is one of the distinctive features of Asian regionalism. Some of the other ones, which are discussed below, which I'll talk about, but as Isua and Dr. Buranelli observed, these features lead to distinctive regionalisms, which can be a barrier to integration, but we have to remember that they can be opportunities for other kinds of regionalism. So some of the distinctive features of any region which can affect integration or prevent it include some cultural values or customs, such as a lack of cooperativeness on certain issues, lack of trust, or beliefs about sovereignty. Again, with national identity, a similar theme can be found, where belief in, say, an importance of national agency, that a nation can control its own destiny, can be crucial to national identity, and integration can be seen as hampering that. Differences in political and economic agendas are also important, because we have to remember that regions are incredibly diverse places. States can face completely different geopolitical contexts while still being in the same region, and so they can have very different priorities. It could also be argued that this is a difference to EU integration, where similar contexts and a shared history and experience provided the scene for integration, which perhaps can't be found in other regions. And finally, as Firdous pointed out, but Altanay really convincingly showed in another dynamic, the importance of external powers. So, for example, Kyrgyzstan receives Chinese aid, and so often is seen to support the one China policy in relation to Taiwan, but this limits Kyrgyzstan's policy maneuverability. This prevents integration because integration requires compromises, policy shifts, and adaptability, none of which can be possible if a state has its policy options limited by outside influences. So these differences can then lead to an unconstructive dialogue between states, which is, as we say, a bit of a vicious cycle. When states find it difficult to work together or to integrate, they start to believe that they can't, and so they don't, and so they believe that they can't, and that carries on. So our question was, what are the difficulties of setting up regional integration? Why have other regions not followed the EU model of ever closer regionalism or ever closer integration, or what has stopped attempts to follow this path being successful? And that is comparative regionalism, as we've all seen. So these are all important features of global regions which can prevent integration and which show how important it is to move away from Eurocentric studies of regionalism and regional integration. So we hope this has outlined some of our group's diverse views on the future trajectories and courses of regionalism in the 21st century and beyond. So thank you very much for listening, and to the facilitators of this summer school, and we would like to hand back over to take any questions you might have. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for this presentation. I think it was a wonderful example of what serendipity can do, right? No one predicted or decided that you would be the last group to present, but having this presentation as the last one did, I believe, a fantastic and marvelous job in summarizing all the previous presentations and the content of the summer school. I think you should be really commended for the way in which you reflected on the big questions, right? Capital B, capital Q. And as I do not have questions, I would simply like to mention as a comment that the way in which you synthesize all these big questions in one single presentation is terrific. It really has been terrific. And the way in which you collaborated on this was very much visible in the slides and in the exposition. I in particular liked the way in which you tried, both from a theoretical and analytical perspective, when you discuss the difficulties of setting up regions, to go beyond between the integration collapse divide, but actually you mentioned other ways, right? To explore the middle ways in which regional clusters can actually form and cooperate. Integration is not the only option. And I think in order to do this, we need more refined theoretical instruments and acquaintance with local theories of cooperation and coexistence as well. So that was for me very fascinating to listen to. And the way in which you went beyond the material of the summer school was, I think, amazing. So thank you much, everyone. As said, I personally do not have any questions to ask, but if anyone from the group has some comments or maybe a couple of questions, one or two questions for the presenters, we do have some time, because actually with the organizers, we shortened the final part of this session. So we do have a few minutes more if you want. Anyone? I think you're also feeling a bit tired, right? It's been quite an intense week so far. So I can see Sebastian has his hand up. So please, Sebastian, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, thank you for a very detailed presentation. I've seen just, you touched the point upon the group 5 particularly, touched the point of the transfer of sovereignty. And I probably need to make some sort of legal remarks, because this is a really controversial issue in the eyes of the legal perspective. So when we talked about the sovereignty, especially in the eyes of the European Union perspective, it's really doctrinal. That means that, as you mentioned, that it's a shared competence, but in a sense, if we use the word sovereignty, it's in the doctrinal level, it's really debatable, because the transfer of sovereignty and the transfer of competences are totally different. And the EU court itself said in the decision that it was the transfer of the sovereign rights rather than sovereignty. And this is etymological differences, and it should be really careful. It should be really taken into consideration in terms of the carefulness of using the term. And that's one of my remarks. Thank you.
Which I believe leads to a topic to explore in comparative regionalism for those of you who are interested. The different meanings and practices of sovereignty across the globe. There may be the case that there are different traditions, understandings, history of what the sovereign power of the ruler is and means, and you can use the tools of comparative regionalism to explore these across the world. So thanks so much for your point, Sebastian. Does any of the presenters have any remarks, or do you want to comment on this point? Anyone? Kazi?
Yes, Doctor. Like, I have very little knowledge about political issues, and from this summer school, I came to know many things. And one thing I can say that same countries sometimes act as very liberal with some countries, and at the same time, it acts like very dominative with other countries. Like this, a dilemma, sort of dilemma that I came to know from the theoretical aspects, liberalism and the new realism. That's it.
Absolutely. And I think also the previous presentations highlighted the way in which we need a multi-perspective focus on states, but also societies, leaders, indigenous peoples, and all the actors that contribute to construct regions historically and politically. So excellent point, Kazi, thank you. Before handing over, a very final remark. So I could see that in the chat, a few people, including Taina and Firdavs, were asking for all presentations to be shared. I think this is an excellent idea. So I invite all groups and all groups representatives to share their PowerPoint to the office email address of the summer school. So please do that. And so that then we can distribute the slides to every single participant. So don't forget to do that because I think it's a very good idea. I will now hand it over to our host and then to Dr. Rosa and Dr. Iqbal John for the concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Filippo, for that. Also, thank you to Group 5 and all of the groups that have presented today. I think the conveners and I also agree that you guys did a very well job today with your presentations. I'm sure that you guys also worked very hard for it throughout the summer school, and I hope that you can receive a lot of knowledge and skills over the course of this event. Good work, participants. A round of applause for yourselves. So before this summer school officially comes to an end, we would like to have a little sharing session, if we may. So in this session, I will be accompanied by my very dear co-host, Bernard. So in this session, participants can share their feelings having completed the summer school, or what they have learned throughout the summer school, their impression on, for example, the lectures or and the presentations, or perhaps your thoughts on Indonesia from the video that we've shared. So if anyone wants to share their impressions, this would be a good time. So I welcome the floor to any of you who wants to share.
Anyone want to share your experience enjoying this online summer school? Please, guys.
Anyone?
Can I?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. For me, the summer school was a chance to enhance my knowledges in the sphere. And I thought that I only will gain new knowledge, but that's all. But after I came, I met a wonderful people around here, and I learned the culture of Indonesia, what was wonderful and stunning. I never used to thought about this country this way, like so much beautiful. And I love to work with other people, because before the summer school, I loved to work alone because I thought that everything will be better if you work by yourself. But then I learned that if you work with people who are kind and gentle with you and responsible, the work becoming a pleasure. So I really enjoyed the summer school, and all information that I got, I literally will use it in the future because it's related to my profession. And I really hope that that's not the last summer school that I participate in, and in the future maybe we will all meet together. So that will be wonderful. Thank you so much for experience, for the connections that we made, and that was really wonderful and it means a lot.
Thank you, Nazim. I think it's a very nice words from you, and looking forward to see you again in the next year summer school. Hopefully we can meet you in a person in Indonesia. Thank you so much. For next, who will give the comments, Arya?
So probably next we have Daniel.
So I would like to congratulate you all, the organizers, and also the students that participate to this summer school. I would like to say that it was not time wasting, because as far as I'm concerned, I learned much from this summer school. From the presentation of the professors, I broadened my understanding of regionalism, and I'm really very happy. I also appreciate the way the summer school was organized with student presentations. So it offered us the opportunity to work together and to know each other a little bit. I cannot say that we network deeply, but it was very much appreciated. The fact that we work in group and we share instead of the time zone that's really different, and we achieve it. So thank you very much. Maybe my recommendation would be that the product of the summer school will be shared early when the professors deliver the lectures. The convener have to share early the documents, because we need this document to read and follow the summer school fully. We have to be engaged. So this is the recommendation that I want to give. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, for that. I'm sure we can all agree that the summer school has not been a waste of time, that we're all gathered here together with the desire to learn and to expand our knowledge. Maybe Joshua, you can go next.
The summer school was amazing, and the only thing that could have made it better was one, meeting in person, and two, talking about all of this over some nice dinners and lunches.
Thank you, Joshua, for that remark. Maybe Vishal, you can go next.
Hello, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
So I would like to first thanks to the organizer and the faculties of Yelahanka University for conducting this wonderful summer school. As I have never experienced such a greatly organized summer school in this pandemic, and it is really nice to meet all the scholars and the students from various universities. But precisely to this summer school, I just wanted to highlight one thing that I think that is actually underrepresented. That the videos which has been played in the summer school on the Indonesian culture, it is actually quite good to get to know about the Indonesian culture and to culturally connect with the Indonesian friends, because in many summer schools, undoubtedly we learn the academic scholarships from various faculties and we brainstorm with each other. But culture is one thing that is absent in many of the summer schools, and it is duly represented in this summer school. So I greatly acknowledge this point, and I really be thankful to all the organizers and the faculties in Yelahanka University. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vishal. Any more response? Maybe.
Yes, thank you. May I say some words, couple words? Thank you so much for good, perfect organizing such collaboration between even countries, not even the people. Thank you, University Erlanga. Thank you, United Nations University. And of course, Narikbayev Kazgu University in Kazakhstan. So Kazakhstan today is really developing country, and we are all interested in such collaboration between countries in international relations. And of course, we provide such approaches and in our university as well. So I am as academic staff, associate professor at university, pretty recommend for future collaboration for my school as well, to join in the future, and maybe made some round tables about regionalism and other political sciences. Thank you for new friends here, new colleagues here. I'm very, very pleasure to see you here. People never could be a lot. This is a gift from God. Thank you very much for organizing a very perfect, excellent, and brilliant summer school, and all speakers, moderators, all your powers were here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dinara, for that. Maybe we can proceed to the last remark. Risha, if I'm not mistaken, you may go next.
Yes, I would like to thank all the organizers, and it was a very enlightening and very positive experience in this times of COVID and this pandemic. We all have been facing so much difficulties in even the daily courses that we do. We're not able to go outside. We're not able to meet other peoples, not even our relatives, even when they are sick. So in these kind of times, it is a very positive thing to come up with such an idea to bring people from all across the globe on a platform where they can share all their ideas and their experiences, and to make new friends and to make some kind of an extended family here is a very nice experience. Otherwise, if we do not have such experiences, we could not have ever been able to come together on such a platform and have interacted with each other. So I would like to thank all the organizers, all the participants for giving such a wonderful time. And as a friend and a colleague rightly said, that it was not at all a time which was wasted. It was a beautiful time to spend with such enlightening people. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard, for the very kind words. Hopefully, this online summer school will be a good platform for all of us to develop our skill, even though we are in this struggling pandemic. So next, perhaps the conveners, would you like to say a few words for our participants? Dr. Filippo, Dr. Ibolcik, or maybe Dr. Rosa, maybe last few words.
Okay, Filippo and Iqbal, allow me to speak for the first time on behalf of the conveners. So everyone, good morning, maybe in Brazil, and good afternoon, good evening, everyone here in Indonesia. I would say distinguished summer school participant, all of us. Well, this is, for me, this is unexpected. For the beginning that we discuss informally, I think this is, yeah, it's wonderful because all of us can see in here platform Zoom by online discussing about an important and an interesting topic about comparative regionalism. So I would say that we are very proud. Congratulations for all of you, and really thank you for all your dedication in attending this summer school. I mean, to be honest, we received more than 100 applicants. And for that, unfortunately, we have to select. And here we are, the 90 participants with excellent, high profile expertise. And not only you, me as a convener and also as an instructor also learn much from all of you. So I believe that we are very proud of this first arrangement of agenda. So, well, I expect and I hope that we are still keep in touch by social media, by email, and maybe for the next year, for the next occasion, we can just like having such a wonderful event of another occasion, and we can share our knowledge, and yeah, we can expand expand our perspective on this expertise. So for this opportunity also, I would like to expand my gratitude to our director of the postgraduate school, Erlangga University, also the director of the United Nations University for Institute on Comparative Regionalism Integration Studies, and the Dean of the Higher School Economic, M. Naribayek, Kasgu University, Kazakhstan. And also from my deep in my heart, I would extend my gratitude to two of my wonderful colleagues, Dr. Iqbal John and Dr. Filippo Costa, for having this effort. And I hope that all of you can do the same thing as us in the future. And to all the esteemed instructor, I extend also my gratitude. And it is an honor for me, for us to having all the instructors. And last but not least, I also thankful to all of the team, the summer school team, specifically for Miss Fitri, the busiest person. And you may still contact her for your certificate, for any kind of material that maybe you miss during the course. And also her teams, which is very superb and wonderful to make this event summer school happen. So yes, see you in any occasion, and please keep in touch by the social media and look forward to hear a good news from you. And maybe we could in touch, we could have a offline event next year after the pandemic is over. So thanks and thank you for all. And the last is that I have to thanks to Arya and Bernard for hosting us from the beginning of our summer school to the end of this day. Thank you so much, everyone.
It's totally my pleasure. Thank you, Dr. Rosa. So next, perhaps Dr. Iqbal John have some few words to say.
Yeah, thank you, Bernard. Thank you, Rosa. So thanks to everyone. Yeah, so as it's evident today, like we all benefited a lot from this summer school experience, yes. So I was quickly having a look at your reflection papers, yeah. And it was kind of very inspiring for me to see, like, first of all, how this interest in regionalism, yes, was shared by so many people representing so many different countries, cultures, and also backgrounds, yeah. And thank you all for all your interesting remarks, interesting commentaries, and also very useful critiques and suggestions for future editions that you raised in your essays. Yeah. And it was very encouraging for us to see that this common effort, yeah, which was mounted up together by people and entities, universities from many different regions in the world, was not in vain. Yeah, you not only acquired many different interesting new fresh insights about different aspects of regionalism. It was very interesting and inspiring to see that this summer school also enabled you to connect to people from across the world, across different cultures. And it also helped you to gain, improve, yeah, your soft skills, your collaboration skills, and it made you closer, yes, as in the words of one of you who wrote in the essay that this summer school made you closer to the world. Yeah, so this is really very pleasant to witness this. And it's in fact also very beneficial from comparative regionalism as discipline. Why? Because it is so fortunate for the discipline, for the epistemic community to attract such a great number of great and smart and innovative creative minds from across the world. So this, in fact, promising for the future of also regionalism studies per se. Yeah, and all this gladdens us as organizers. Yeah, so we are so happy to see this result. Okay, and as a final word, yeah, I would like also to thank our colleagues, yes, Rosa, Filippo, and our universities and employers that supported us, Erlangen University, UNU Chris from Belgium, and my current employer, Kazgu University. Yeah. So this is really a great contribution to all of us. Yeah. Especially I want to make a special thanks to Erlangen University, which did a great performance as a host. Yes. So we thank Rosa, Miss Fitri, our host, Arya, Bernard, and many, many others that maybe we didn't see directly, but who were there, yes, making this event flow without any disruptions. Yeah, and I would like to say that, like, as it is already happening in the chat, yes, do keep in touch with us and do keep in touch with each other. Be a bridge between your respective countries' cultures, because this kind of intercultural dialogue, yes, and cross-country, cross-discipline, cross-fertilization is only beneficial for all of you. So thank you all, and see you in next occasions, online or offline. So thanks to everyone, and best of luck to each of you.
Thank you, Dr. Iqbal. I really hope that we can meet you in person after the pandemic. And last but not least, I would like to invite Dr. Filippo. Perhaps that you will have that you have any few words to say in this closing session.
Thank you so much. I think it will be difficult not to repeat what Dr. Rosa and Dr. Iqbal have said already. I just really want to share this piece of personal information with all the students. And Dr. Rosa and Dr. Iqbal were in your position less than 10 years ago, right? We were attending a summer school on comparative regionalism. And since then, we have always dreamt and wanted to somehow give back all the goodness and the knowledge and the generosity we got from the speakers and the organizers and the teachers that we interacted with back then. It was a different world. We were in person. The world seemed to be a nicer place, and there was more cooperation around. The world was more open, okay? And now we live in different times, and we are going through very severe difficulties in our interactions, but also in our personal lives. And therefore, this summer school was, for us, for the three of us, the chance we really waited for all this time to try to give back all the generosity and the good things we received. And I believe these very much exceeded our expectations. Firstly, because at least from a personal perspective, I can say that this has been the best academic experience this year, as far as I'm concerned. Like interacting with all of you, 60 and more participants from 30 different countries, as if we had been knowing each other for all this time, very much opened my mind and very much made me think that there are beautiful minds across the world. And I will never be thankful enough for having come across you guys. Because without online learning, paradoxically, it would have been far more difficult to see you and meet you. So I'm grateful for this. And secondly, I think my my wish came through in the sense that I learned a lot from you. So don't be deceived by the fact that I'm one of the teachers and you are the students, because actually you taught me a lot. And reading your reflexive essays, your presentations, your commitments, your discussions in groups, you really refined my knowledge and made me think about a lot of things I didn't think of in my studies and in my profession. So you have all my gratitude, and you also have my availability to stay in touch if you want to discuss ideas about comparative regionalism, your careers and your lives. You know where to find me. Hopefully next time we meet again will be in person in any of the corner of the world we are coming from. To be a bit less emotional and a little bit more funny, I also want to say that this summer school actually gave me the chance to do something about summer, because in Scotland at the moment we have 13 degrees and it's absolutely cold and windy and cloudy. So to have a summer school is actually something summery, so great. And last but not least, I would really love to thank Dr. Iboljon and Dr. Rosa for being wonderful colleagues and friends. I was not originally part of the team. They invited me along the way to contribute to this, and I will never be grateful enough to them for making me part of this amazing team. Airlangga University, Glasgow, United Nations Universities. Miss Fitri has been stellar alongside Arya and Bernard. Really, guys, you rock. So thank you for making this possible. Apologies if sometimes things didn't run as smoothly as planned with the delivery of the material, the readings. We all face some difficulties, but I'm glad we reached the end. And thank you for your feedback, because this will help us organize an even better summer school in the future years. So you're already contributing to making things better. And I'll stop here because now we have to move to certificates and stuff, but I'll take you with you. I'll take you all with me, sorry. And thank you so much for enriching my life with this opportunity and summer school. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Filippo. It's very nice words from you. I do agree that this online summer school brings a very good positive energy for all of us in building our career in our future. So next, everyone, we are going to have a symbolic certifications for all the participants of this summer school for having complete this 5 days long program. So perhaps the committee can show some of the certificates. So congratulations for all of the participants that has joined this online summer school. Congratulations, everyone. So for your information, all the certificate and the certificate of attendance will be delivered into your email accounts. So please do check it out. So after this, perhaps Arya, what sections that we will have after this?
Thank you, Bernard. I want to say huge congratulations again to the participants here today. I hope that this experience will enrich your individual careers and your individual lives, and may it be useful in the future. And with that being said, I would like to bring today's agenda, as well as this entire summer school, to an end. We will hear from Professor Badri as the Director of Postgraduate School of Universitas Airlangga for some closing remarks. Prof. Badri, silakan.
Thank you, Mas Arya, Mas Bernard. Distinguished speakers, Dr. Saule Kamalbayeva, Dean of Glasgow University, and Professor Felipe de Lombardi, Director of United Nations University, and also Dr. Farhad Tolipov, Director of Non-Governmental Research Institutions, Knowledge Caravan Uzbekistan, as well as all of the distinguished instructors, Dr. Iqbal John Karabayev from KASGU, and also Dr. Filippo Costa Buranelli from St. Andrews University, and Dr. Rosa Ristawati, Postgraduate School, Erlangga University, as well as Dr. Radian, and Vice Director, Head of Study Program, and the beloved summer school participants. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good evening, everyone. The online summer school on comparative regionalism in a changing world order 2021 is the first summer school presenting global experts discussing a specific topic, regionalism. As I mentioned previously on Monday, the objective is to expose participants to the field of research on comparative regionalism in global arena in the context of emerging power and shifting political or economic balances. We wish our summer school students can understand the logic of regionalism, and also by understanding that, maybe we can follow by realizing the potential of Greater Asia as the next locomotive growth, as well as each country for the betterment of society, not only for economy, but also social, political, and laws. Similar logic can also be applied to Africa, Europe, North and South America, as well as Australia. Last but not least, we also thank you to all of the participants, 75 participants from 27 countries to participate in this summer school. If you have any feedback, please don't hesitate to inform us in order to make our summer school better. If you satisfied, so please spread out the word and invite other students to participate in our next collaborative events. I believe that with the support of the Ambassador of Republic Indonesia in Kazakhstan and Tajikistan, as well as KASGU University, United Nations University, St. Andrews University, again, I propose that we can create future events, such as winter school with multidisciplinary issues about ASEAN and European Union or other regional institutions, particularly the world order post-COVID-19. So again, please give big applause to all the honorable speakers, instructors, conveners, as well as all of the participants, including our host, Mr. Arya Raditya, and also Mr. Bernard Situmorang. And also, particularly to our International Partnership Unit, Dr. Rosa Ristawati, Dr. Radian Salman, as well as our supporting staff, already mentioned several times, Mrs. Fitri Wardani and teams, and also Vice Director of Postgraduate School who make this event happen successfully. Again, thank you and have a wonderful, enjoyable, and insightful summertime in each country. Wish meeting you soon after the pandemic era personally, inshallah. Thank you and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you, Professor Badri, for that warm closing remark. Thank you once again and congratulations to all the participants here today for having completed this summer school. I hope that you will continue to excel in your own individual paths and that the things you got from this summer school will be useful for your studies and in the future. Thank you once again to the conveners, Dr. Rosa, Dr. Filippo, and Dr. Iqbal John, and their associated institutions for holding such a remarkable and memorable event. Let's hope that in the future we can gather again in the next summer school program that will be held hopefully physically. Thank you everyone and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you everyone. See you.
Thank you. Goodbye. Enjoy your summer.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Enjoy your summer.
Thank you.
Yeah, enjoy your summer.
Summer. Enjoy summer.
Ini Vice Director.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.